we're going to do a live show, press conference with Mr. Kagan from Washington, D.C. He's Assistant Deputy Secretary for the New Zealand, the Australia, and the Pacific region. He's on the line right now. It's late in the afternoon in Washington, D.C., and we're going to try to talk to him. So I'm going to pass the line to Mr. Kagan so he can start briefing us of the status of the compact review. Hello, Mr. Kagan. Are you still online? Hello, Mr. Kagan. Well, he's probably was disconnected, so let me go ahead and try to connect him back up again and see if we can talk to him. Okay, so please stand by. Hello, Mr. Kagan. Hello, Mr. Kagan.
Yes, hello, how are you?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry that I put you on hold for too long while we had a little technical problems with...
I'm afraid this is a very bad connection.
Okay, can you hear me?
Would it be possible for you to speak up, sir?
Okay, I'm going to try to speak loud to see if you can hear me. You're on the air now. You're on television. You're on the air. So can you go ahead and start? You're coming in okay. So just go ahead and start talking, and then we'll be able to hear you.
Certainly. My name is Edgard Kagan, and I'm a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs at the U.S. State Department, and I'm responsible, amongst other things, for overseeing U.S. relations with Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands. I accompanied Assistant Secretary Kurt Campbell and Admiral Cecil Haney, the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, in their visit to Palau at the beginning of August. And I wanted to say that we are very grateful for the friendship and support of Palau. This past week saw some significant progress in the movement towards renewal of the financial terms of the compact, with the submission of legislation to the Senate floor that contains, we believe, to be a very appropriate package to continue the funding of the compact. The legislation was submitted, but given the very short session, there was no vote on it. We believe that the progress so far reflects extraordinary bipartisan cooperation, and in particular leadership by some of the representatives of U.S. territories in the Pacific, in particular Representative Bordallo, Representative Sablan, and Representative Farrow Mavenga. We believe that this close cooperation across the aisle between Republicans and Democrats and between the executive and legislative branches is a sign of the strong support we have for Palau and our commitment to making sure that the compact continues. Obviously, we were disappointed that there was that we weren't able to close this in last week. However, as I said, given the very short session, it wasn't a complete surprise. We remain committed and believe that our other partners are completely committed to trying our very best to do this when Congress is in session again.
Okay, sir. I got a question to ask you. The identification of acceptable offset, which has been the main sticking point in approval of the Compact Review Agreement before the United States Congress, has already been resolved. Despite that, the Compact has yet to be fully approved by the United States Senate and Congress. What's the reason for the delay? Is there an assurance that it will be approved before the end of this year or before the next Congress convenes?
Well, that is an excellent question, and we remain committed to doing this as quickly as possible. The State Department and the administration are fully committed to doing everything we can to renew the financial terms, and we're working very closely with our partners in Congress and both the House and Senate to do this. There will be another session of both the House and Senate, and we believe that we are confident we will make every effort to get it done then. The fact that the legislation has formally been submitted is a very significant step, and we believe that this does reflect the extraordinary cooperation that has taken place in the last few weeks and beyond between the House, Senate, and the administration, and between Republicans and Democrats. And this reflects our commitment to Palau and the strong recognition on the part of officials throughout the U.S. government and the legislative branch of Palau's importance.
Mr. Kagan, the one question that is very important for the people in this country to understand is that the 2013 budget, can we count on you that there will be money there to help us fund the 2013 fiscal year?
Well, that's a very good question. Unfortunately, I can barely hear you, but one of the things that was done is that there was a continuing resolution that for 6 months, and so this has funded our existing discretionary support for Palau through the Department of Interior. And I would like to note our very close cooperation in the State Department with our colleagues in the Department of the Interior, and in particular the leadership of Assistant Secretary Tony Babauta. The funding essentially continues at the existing levels for the next 6 months. So we believe that while obviously we would prefer to see a renewal of the compact's financial terms that would allow for more certainty in the longer term, we do believe that, at least in the short run, for the next 6 months, the existing funding levels will be maintained.
Okay. Last year, the $13 million we were getting from United States compact agreement with Palau, and it came down to 12.8 or 9 million. Now, the assurance we want to get from United States government is to let us know whether we're going to get the funding for 2013 or not. Is there any possibility that we will get that funding for fiscal year 2013?
Yes, I'm sorry, I may not have been clear. One of the things that was passed was a continuing resolution that contains funding for essentially the next 6 months, or the first 6 months of fiscal year 2013, at the existing level. So basically, it's essentially half of last year's level for the next 6 months. So the funding will continue as it did last year.
Okay, let me see if I understand that. So you say that beginning 2013 fiscal year, starting from October 1st, we only get 6 months of funding? Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. And the reason for that is the entire U.S. government budget is only funded for the next 6 months in the form of a continuing resolution, which essentially maintains existing funding levels for 6 more months. So in no way is this discrimination against Palau. This is something that reflects the overall U.S. government funding. And in fact, there's no funding stream, no discretionary funding stream is guaranteed beyond that. However, the expectation is that there will be a budget that will continue beyond that and that will be up, of course, to Congress to make decisions on that. But I think that the important thing is that for the funding levels continue as they did in fiscal year 2012 for the first half of 2013, and we're confident that there will be movement on the overall budget, either in the form of an actual budget or another continuing resolution to ensure the funding of government operations. So we believe that what this essentially does is ensures existing levels of funding and allows us to focus on working with the Congress, which obviously has the lead on this, to encourage them to pass legislation in the House and Senate that will allow for the renewal of the long-term financial arrangements of the compact.
Mr. Kagan, sir, thank you so much. Please convey our message to the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and also Kurt Campbell and yourself. On behalf of the government of Palau, Presidents Johnson Toribio and also the Minister of State, Dr. Yano, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being able to talk to us and inform us or brief us of the status of our compact of free association with the United States?
Certainly. It is a great honor and it's a great pleasure. And I would just like to reiterate that Secretary Clinton and Assistant Secretary Campbell are very, very aware of the importance of Palau to the United States and are very committed to the relationship. We are very grateful for Palau's support and for the friendship and the Compact of Free Association with the people of Palau. And we are very confident that this is a strong relationship that benefits both the people of the United States and the people of Palau. And we look forward to working to strengthen it, broaden it, and improve it.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Kagan, and it's been nice talking with you. Bye-bye.
It's been great talking to you. Thank you very much. And to all the people of Palau, we are very grateful for your friendship. Goodbye.
Okay, seguidre lang sil live coverage lo pangela Mr. Kagan el kaya aku kongura artiagi del region el tangarangi so lang ang los edel mga dadu ra Mr. Kagan nagigi del important el question el wasay most of edel ngwa full funding ra 2013 and gigi del make it clear that the first 6 months of 2013 is okay, but after that, you know, it all depends on the United States Congress and the Senate to see if they're going to approve that full funding. Mr. Kagan is the if I'm right, he came here with Kurt Campbell. I think I heard him saying that he came here with Kurt Campbell. Ngal other halugul ko tora Mrikeles mitor hela kom guk malwasing guk mlamam lo tora Marialas di ngegi ngara Washington em ngar ai klo mate ngar elon klo mate do bara sengira Washington DC so lang em los edel katsingi en mga do mergid lo ai sergid ratlet la compact ma funding so lang Jeff Farrow ngegi the consultant sertegi del tora compact lo mtera blur belaura Washington DC he's there direct lang ara Washington DC misakl el mo o change el guk mura Jeff Farrow mergo ngara Washington DC lo ngod do urgid el mut telgib mo detail al girel tiagi el tora compact review go ma di stand by so lang ya guk mo o connect ra Jeff Farrow el ngi ngara Washington DC mang mos edel mga do urgi okay. Tia roi de mering la aral mo o enjang suada ko ora dio la dongo du okay 3995 okay al dongo digil was sen svedel connector ngi jam gem ngo du mergid ngara cell phone akum daswang tiake. Okay, Jeff, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. You're coming in.
We don't. I can hear you barely, but if you hear me, that's
okay.
Probably the most important.
Okay, you're coming in so clear and loud, you know. So I'm gonna try to talk to you and shout at you. But you know, if you can hear me, please, by all means, to go ahead and say what you have to say. Okay. So good morning, Jeff, and welcome to the show. I have just talked to Mr. Kagan, and he talked to us in regards to the status of. Compact review and also next year funding for 2013 funding. You know, we thank him. You know, for being able to talk to us through this conference. And now the line is on you, Jeff Farrow.
Okay. Would you like me just to talk?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Go ahead and talk, and then if I have a question, I will ask you. Can you okay. Go ahead? Can you go ahead and brief us?
I guess there are two things we should talk about that you mentioned that you spoke to Deputy Assistant Secretary Kagan about. One was continued funding, compact funding for Palau and federal programs after September 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year. And as I'm sure Secretary Kagan mentioned, Congress passed legislation that would continue current funding of compact money for Palau and federal programs at basically based on the current level of funding for the first half of the next fiscal year, which begins October 1st, and so going through March 27th. And so, for example, for the basic compact grant that Palau gets, that would be about $6.6 million. And all federal programs would continue as well at basically their current levels. So that's one issue. The other issue, of course, is the compact review agreement. And we spoke about that when I was in Palau with the congressional delegation. We spoke about it at length. And let me tell you what's happened since that time. When we were there, the Congress was scheduled to come back into session on September 10th and stay in session until October 4th. Instead, Congress came back in on September 10th and recessed the elections on September 21st. And the reason for that is that, as in the past 19 months, the Congress was unable to reach agreements on just about anything. I just sent you, Senator, an article that was in the New York Times 3 days ago that demonstrates that this is the least productive Congress within the lifetime of almost anybody alive. And they were comparing it to the do-nothing Congress that President Truman ran against in 1948, and showing that that Congress, the do-nothing Congress that President Truman ran against when he was reelected, was actually much more productive than this Congress. Because of this presidential election, because of this election in particular for the Senate, Republicans wanted to, and I'm not being partisan about this, but Republicans felt they could be as rigid as they wanted to about their policy positions because they were hopeful that they would either win the presidency in 2012 and or win control of the Senate. And Democrats also didn't want to compromise. So much of the business of this entire Congress has been left to the post-election session. It's called the lame duck session, as if the congressmen are lame ducks when they return. And so even though the Congress was supposed to be in session now and until October 4th, and we hope that that would give time to get final approval of the compact review agreement approval legislation, they recessed September 21st, and there's a great effort to try to get the compact approval legislation done right before the recess, as a matter of fact, into early Saturday morning our time, which I guess would be Saturday night your time. People were working on it up until the last moment that the Senate recessed, even after the House had recessed. In particular, what happened that was important was the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee came up with a proposal to solve, a new proposal to solve what's been the issue with compact review agreement legislation. No one in Congress has questioned the compact review agreement, and many members of Congress, including leaders of both political parties, Democrats and Republicans, have agreed upon it and agreed upon legislation for it. The question from the beginning has been, under the new rules of Congress, how to pay for the cost of the agreement, how to pay for the additional assistance for Palau over a 12-year period. And this is a government that's in the U.S. that's functioning on budgeting on a 6-month basis right now, a 12-year basis. There are very few laws that provide for funding 12 years into the future. So the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee came up with a new proposal. The federal government, helium, the gas, is produced on federal land, and the federal government sells this helium to people who want to use it. And so the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee proposed to take some of the money that the federal government is getting from the sale of helium in the fiscal year 2014, which begins October 1st, 2013, through fiscal year 2018, and use that money to fund the entire compact review agreement for the 12-year period. And they packaged that into legislation that would have approved the compact review agreement, would have dedicated some of the money from the sale of helium to pay for the agreement. The sale of helium that they proposed would have raised more money than needed to pay for the compact assistance to Palau. So they proposed using some of the money to clean up abandoned mines in the West. That was particularly important to senators from the state of Wyoming, where there's some abandoned mines that pose some danger and need to be cleaned up. And sent that to the Senate, the full Senate, and there was a great effort on the part of to get that legislation approved. There were objections at the last minute. We don't yet know what the objections were, except we know that they were not to the Palau provisions. So they either would relate to some of the other provisions in the bill, which deal with funding for cleaning up abandoned mines in Wyoming, the sale of helium, as I said, and some changes of law and funding for other critical minerals that have a strategic importance. So what the good news was out of that was the bill went to the Senate floor, was seen by all 100 senators, and not one senator raised a concern about the Palau provisions. However, there were a couple of concerns raised about other provisions of the bill, and that will have to be addressed in the post-election session. Before we went out to Palau with the congressional staff delegation, as you know, there was another offset idea that Palau actually we suggested, and the House Foreign Affairs Committee adopted, and that idea was to deny passports to Americans who had tax debts of greater than $50,000 and allow the Secretary of State to cancel the passports of people who had those tax debts. And the idea was that would get some of these people who owe more than $50,000 in taxes to pay those taxes, and that would raise revenue, and that revenue could pay for the compact review agreement. The idea was a good one. It was adopted by the House Foreign Affairs Committee, but the House Ways and Means Committee, which is the tax committee as it is in the OEK, the Ways and Means Committee decided that they liked the proposal, but they didn't want it to be used for anything other than helping to pay for other changes in tax law. So the leadership of the House of Representatives, and by that I mean Majority Leader Eric Cantor and Speaker John Boehner, then started to work on coming up with committees on coming up with other ideas for funding the compact review agreement. There's one idea that the Majority Leader Cantor's budget advisor came up with, which is still being looked at. There's another idea, a little more generally, that the Natural Resources Advisor to Speaker Boehner came up with that he's pursuing. And so the good news of this is that the House Republican leadership is very involved in the effort to get the compact review agreement legislation passed. They told me Friday when the House went out of session, or right before it went out of session, that they weren't going to succeed with resolving the offset issue before the recess, but we're very committed to getting this done in the lame duck session of Congress, which begins November 13th, just a week after the elections, and goes through the end of the year. So you have the Obama administration, the bipartisan committees in the Senate, bipartisan committees in the House, the leadership of the House, the Republican leadership of the House, which has primarily been fighting with the Obama administration, all committed to trying to work out something during the lame duck session of the Congress and finding a cost offset. The other important point I think I want to make about the lame duck session of this Congress, it goes back to how little this Congress has accomplished in the 19 months that have gone past. Each Congress lasts for 2 years, as you know, 24 months. 19 months of this Congress has gone past. And they've made almost no decisions except to where they've imperative continued current law to buy a little more time until we get past the elections. There are major spending and tax decisions that the government of the United States, the Congress, needs to make, and the President, before the end of this year. If they don't make those decisions, laws are going to change automatically. For example, cutting spending for every U.S. government program, with a few exceptions. Compact assistance, by the way, is one of the exceptions, but just a few exceptions. Every government program will be cut by an average of about 1/12. Taxes will go up substantially. Income taxes on all Americans, on their income, on their investments. There are over 60 provisions of tax law involving business that will expire. Medicare, which is the U.S. medical system for the elderly and disabled, the Medicare payments for doctors will go down by 30% if legislation is not passed by the end of the year. And I can go on with a lot of huge decisions that literally involve trillions of dollars. And if these decisions are not made by the end of the year, economists agree that the U.S. economy will go into recession. So there will be a lot of pressure on this Congress to make the decisions they haven't made over the past 2 years. And this will involve trillions of dollars. And so there will be a lot of budgetary vehicles that can provide cost offsets for the Compact Review Agreement legislation after the elections. So I'm very optimistic about the Compact Review Agreement legislation becoming law. I think it probably will be before the end of the year. It is always foolish to predict the future, and particularly foolish to predict the future of what the U.S. Congress will do in the future. But there is no opposition to the Compact Review Agreement legislation. There is a lot of strong leadership support for it. Your next guest, Ambassador Koshiba, it knows that I was the lead member of the House of Representatives staff on the legislation for the Compact itself when it passed the Congress in the late 1980s. And I can tell you that there is more involvement by the leadership of the House of Representatives, the Speaker, the Majority Leader, in trying to find the offset for the Compact Review Agreement legislation than there was involvement of the Speaker and the Majority Leader in the whole Compact when it passed in the late 1980s. So I'm pretty optimistic about the future with respect to this legislation, and we will just have to wait a little while longer.
Okay, Jeff, I got one question for you.
So I don't know if you have any questions.
Well, just see if you can answer the question. I'm kind of, don't understand, the first part of fiscal year 2013, they only fund the first 6 months. Is there any reason for that?
Is there any? I can't hear you very well. But you were asking about why 6 months funding?
Yes, yes.
Because the Congress was unable to reach. This Congress this year has not passed a single appropriations bill for any U.S. government program. And they realized that they were not going to be able to reach agreement between the Democrats and Republicans, really between the President and the Republican leadership of the House, before the elections. The fiscal year ends September 30th. Neither side wants most U.S. government programs to shut down. And so they reached a political agreement to extend funding based on the current level for 6 months so that they would see the results of the election. If the Republicans win, if Mitt Romney gets elected president, and or if Republicans win majorities in a majority of the seats in the Senate, then Republicans will be less likely to compromise with Democrats until early next year, after the new Congress and the new president take office, which is in next January, because they will recognize in the lame duck session that they'll have more power in the negotiating with the Republican president and or Republican Senate. If President Obama is reelected and Democrats retain a majority of seats in the Senate, then Republican leaders say they will be more likely to compromise later this year. But since nobody knows the results of the elections before they happen, the Republicans wanted the extension of current funding to go for a few months into next year, so they would have the possibility that a new Republican president and a new Republican Senate would be able to have greater influence in the final negotiating early next year. Now, if I had to predict, and I would predict that President Obama gets reelected and Democrats retain a majority in the Senate. And I think it's too early to predict that, but that's what it looks like as of today in the United States. In that case, most of these decisions are going to be made later this year rather than early next year. But the 6 months was so in case the Republicans get more political power, they would then have more influence in the negotiating early next year than they could have before the end of this year.
Jeff, I got this one more question, if you don't mind. The question is, it doesn't look very promising the way the compact review is being, looked at and processed between United States and Palau. First, we were excited that it's going well, but at this time point, due to the fact that the United States going through the same election year and Palau is going through the same election year, and I have this feeling like maybe also United States Congress and the government of the United States are looking at us to see who's going to be elected, more likely like the people that's going to be in this 9th Congress or 9th government of Palau. Are they going to be responsible enough or less corrupted people, so it's okay to give them full funding? Because when you cut it in half now, I can sense that maybe somebody is not trusting us. So therefore, you cut it in half and wait until after the election, and then you say whether you want to fund the whole thing or not. That's how I feel, and that's the question I'm asking you.
Well,
do you think it's possible?
Maybe I wasn't clear. What the Congress and the President have agreed on is funding for all U.S. government programs is only for the next half year.
I see.
And so every U.S. government program, not just in Palau, but across the United States and across the world, every U.S. government program is just being continued based on the current funding for another half year, another 6 months, because of the fights between the President and the Congress and the elections. And these elections will be decisive in those fights. Everybody knows that they can't delay these decisions past much further without the U.S. government, without the U.S. going back into economic recession. So they know the decisions need to be made in the coming months. But the 6 months is for all U.S. government programs. It's for funding that has nothing to do, all funding, most funding doesn't have anything to do with Palau. So it's not related to Palau at all.
Okay, Jeff, you're coming in very clear, and the whole country is watching you on television and listening to you on the radio. And we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. So on behalf of Ambassador Koshiba and also Minister of State Dr. Yano and the Vice President and President Johnson Toribong, we would like to take this opportunity and thank you so much for working so hard for us. And please, by all means, if any changes to the compact review, don't hesitate to call me. You got my number, and let me know. We go on the air and you explain to us as to what happened or what's going on with our compact of free association with the United States. I'm going to give you a line so you can say a few words and say goodbye to our audience. And the next guest will be Ambassador Joshua Koshiba.
Well, Senator, that you were very kind to say what you've said, and I am always happy to talk to you and your listeners and viewers. And I won't say anything more because you have next appearing one of the great statesmen of Palau in Ambassador Koshiba, and he's part of a leadership team that has a great deal of respect. I know within the U.S. government, in the Congress, and in the executive branch of the United States, Secretary Clinton of the State Department, for whom I used to work, knows and has met with President Toribong, along with many congressional committee chairmen and others. And there is a great deal of respect for the leadership in Palau and confidence in Palau. And even though this is, Palau is kind of caught up in U.S. politics for a while, and that's delayed approval of the review agreement legislation, I have no doubt at all that it is going to be approved when the politics clear, and that'll be sometime after this election. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jeff, and bye-bye. We'll see you later. Okay, Jeff Farrow. Yagid ngel oreol mergid mga dadu tirgel adra Congress ra blura brigel mar high officials ra administration ra Obama, which is their boss, is Hillary Clinton. So kamreng asuli war adra belaw no sabi ulo o reng sa igayid el klamrang el togoy ngara Washington el May. Makumdas we gamir adra belaw am lamom dangel wasenga kamrit lammal te klamrang e diakno magpitang el information legor gamiu. Mang komoreng sa ikang ekmea disay del wasay asen kyorak luguk adal bangarngi sola como mesra gal president Toribio Magaray Mariur el mrulam lins ungil el teletele laureor el mergidar adrebelau rogui solang gidtari ring sia Mr. Kagan el yakuk komtera State Department el mga dur gidre la tutau solang direct kadamlarong si Mr. Jeff Farrow, which is engaged in gel consultant telon kukway el medad del dinga del ngara Washington el labieste el ngara Washington el murulay gagi del ureore report el mergid solang el amonex el guest gid gel ambassador gid el compact review el Joshua Koshiba el mertiang el guk direct el mos misi mal ubeng mo olta ay gil del bool togoy las amesois el ser al ngartiang at tamir mong Sao Junior en wasengya ulumu raureor En so akal metiang mergolo otisel babier rakabalment Ramrigel wase indiakal somaman mga dudu urgawet tamir mga saul giretial el compact and there's nothing to talk about. Oy. Les 7 years aguna iliti sel iliti egemesois pel 8 years goli sel restringi. Oy. Mung elan di toner sel el duun lamumrek. Ya gumesam rigela ol kasakes selwase kahalabon mereka senkyo do meselwase tamakadung al ama mora kablement tamakadung mestira full funding al ubat tugok tigay gidel betokol ng reng arge 88 million 88 million al mulai 8 years al 11 million at ngarger ngarger ay galudo. That's the question. Ya kablement tram rigel o meselgid politically, hindi ka soril ko na may interfere na kapag hindi omra nila kumesang waisay. Kami sa lang, hindi lecture as hindi 6 months. Maski da excuse. Hindi ka kaya kumrar tilo asay ke. Ngaringi aloro ringi hindi ka totangay. Omra nila mas first 6 months? I don't know. Thomas, lel sugum, nga sel kumesir, ngiyak mal di mo honest with you. Ako kumesir nilo asay, asugum mangil tatamir mga saw, gil 6 months sa taka ngayong niya. Lagi kita lang, mertiang mula setigida babiel di melakukan Hillary Clinton, tilob dra officer ni, agel official babiel al lotob dra lang, agel report mora UN ma mora ya Congress ram rigel, se los State Department en seguida mergong, dia kalsan every documents coming out of her office. Magi ngara website tra State Department ram rigel em latob del melo ay selwasay, ay gagida aul esolang aquí. Dia ki mo brang malo bay gagid atel melel anggal le presidente belao le aira mang achoy sang argamil tumek nga kaulak merur tiang ao ay sergamil wasay ali gomol mo uit adang okay madal wasay solang ngarnya direk el babier el ngartiang el gulab el gagid el ang el babier el agag umlara finance el may Etiang aboko tubadi motob dra newspaper ako nasong el alsils. Tiang rela ayer kul air mais lulay ang agidle. Brother Kashmir. Oy. $20,000 sel lalu maara lakal maara la. Dia ko ngelo sendi mas food and drink. $20,000. May gang direct motob dra el alsils. Elang masomi lo ase doltob daigang hale de bora finance me doltob del may kabo kab justify ga igal ara la lu el wild diesel ma ara la kal gang lorker. Can you explain that? Eso lang during Remengasaw administration el 8 years and $30 million sablel pay el mora asurang al insurance company. Akmo mas kami document. Okay? Kada mo masada ay gil bebirra ay gagidele. Payment ma contractual award ma otru lelti ay gidel sosyo ma atiale Eurasia. Kada mo to ba ay gay? Magmosbi mo madangelo sentao mula karta. So mi ada kayo olte lam kada ang akmol to ba ay gagidel mal mas kami ay gagidel nga igal babier man sabi mig makapir ngal somiu. Hindi motob dra newspaper direk. Mali ko mo korgik, abelawa de alcohol. Talvez se komano masaul sa live coverage na kuktora compact review na Washington DC May, Mr. Kagan, Mr. Farrow, los mga dodo orgida other belaw. And don't go away because our next guest is Ambassador Koshiba. So please stand by and I'll be right back. Talvez eso la marco poco le ngitu taw mergidero kuy so lang kada ma anmutel mo mol marabrong ram mergidero la tu taw kagida Ambassador Koshiba mlami mang akote so lang kita ngara final day ra tial togora senkura kluguk es important la adre belawa mo madangek lamrang ya ki mo masaw daigang loya ka document sa gagida to documents ra finance ma newspaper marogay gang ati gulgoy lengara papiere public information comme remember sen de la setomart el agid octobre rogui el morabuay mo como mesra se ta mil karang odora lundas la se mem di ngara se ngaram lam katmok eso la ngara das so mem katmok digo lum merap comme ne tobra public yo i be mula se como creo sa information el morabuay which is en krokle labuay. Mela ka top de rogui mangwilar meu. Kot eso lang kestrigid la tutaum ka kita mangungedel kestrigid Mr. Kagan amle first nara State Department tra Washington DC. Eso lang second Jeff Farrow and consultant tra tegi the compact review lo rolo pangela Ambassador Koshiba direct nara Washington DC. Eso lang elang ka kita Ambassador Koshiba ngartiang mansabet el momento do ringil gire la tora compact malmut el baby issues el gire dar other belau moment ngeklemrang. Legang kimosad ekyola pa documents. Abang egal documents sa government documents mansabit makapirngi mengyam la tora tia belau. Kot ya toko era compact review. Kemerin ngsia tamiral ngartiang amla sengia mil eliau reor. Abilik kwartial gomlong eso lang mil eliau reor kapalment tramrikela am los tatel mga do urtire sola ngari seguide mral mer serabelsis pa Koshiba seguide mloayal al pick up persel reole rolmon moringin merela mang actually tial reor al go milket mokr sela temela tamil ngar alsel kahale dogar ambassador el wasei kamo ais el wasei ser omsis bertial reor oi egam lo sois para kaskelel ngaria babir kapalment tramrigel mlel mul wasei ang diak aldo du emergoy kam lus kemiam los miul mol mas in mga do ra kabel tamrigen wasigi de buay hal gulngitra ambassador Koshiba botso di selmergit ambassador Koshiba.
Okay, Senator Musula. Ang artikel malukot toil dakal marang mak aktibo ay sadet. Kau mga kam de senator. Ya babir mera presidente Mosaura May 2 2007 na dilun dia ka aldo unara other Christopher Hill mle ambassador Southeast Asia ngel longerura Condoleezza Rice ngel secretary of state adilura tamilo sen dia ka aldo Amerikela dia ka long do May 2 2007 ngakabay din na kung liya lerer Manzulo, Almora Manzulo, naringila July 13 2007. El directo ngitra, a Congreso ngitra, a Nicholas Burner wase beli aldo. Iya directo dilundia, a de tringe gagi de Black Times sangal adra news mdingin mo. E Augustur era que va a ser va a ver a Christopher Hill Almora temis mulen el Minister of State tergit. Le temis pula diregen bil usulmong eng belu usulmelo sin diaga aldo. El ay kan dinagi mo ngey. Di sera gimo mul. Ya adam lar bela omodongli senator ngel Mike Channon. Giam le lawyer la presidenta Ramasao. Mungge sera gim gotul mit kamam til mamangin gal mamala president Toribong agul ger ngira tal gelenge ko amles legal alam makmuntal adram rigel officer government State Department authorize en mga dur belaw endilundia tanak mundia engka un magpulo siya o mesay galba bien la Christopher Hill ma Nicholas Byrne en mga sendia mangaram ko kan tinul spend daw el mga algo ko mo do tiya enya se gdo gyo arbay gdo gyo kongres maka di se mai dia ga imol kongres negotiate girela tarablu lo bangila mrigel a kongres amrigela dia negotiate lo bangila tarablu State Department ella menciona clela sa legal adra interior tambusanits. Gigi man makatambusanis sa staff. Dia kan sepen negotiate lom teram rigid. Tanggel lom teram rigid. Ella sen diak. Adal black ko adra kong alabis kamlingget adra gel gal adra bangel amay. Aklabe sa clela gela. Gigi dia mark el beden mora adra kongres.
Masih.
Makmuntanggil adra kongres en bolgo ngil gire del mga duri. Implementation ng klen gagi del Manzulo. Manzulo magran negotiate lo bangela government bela. Masegi lihat taram le ulagi mle ko tora mai lo sekali dia kal sab emel lo ngosero belau. Lingkal presiden Toribong Sierra Luisa egal meset semlara Christopher Hill ma Nicholas Bourne en tilo bladal bangel lengwa se ela 209 yang office ya October 1st mo dia kaudod mangmagarang magim lagarang gingwa Stuartbeck ulma gimilar ngim le kot lawyer ra kampak sel kot kampak ong erung agi mengil wa senggang adila kal skuli ma Hillary Clinton bese sumu gadir mengil rekor dringi akmle hire ringi temporary lawyer ra kampak mumle $100,000 ayit sera bon mereka sengar adelak atilu ko margo ese gidral lamay indimle advice sa president wa sa Hillary blal appoint ringin mo secretary of state hindi dirgagal mga Senate, hindi kita ko hete, lekatakan tilo asing mangay. Edolo us request audience. Maulma presidenta alit siya president Toribong alit siya birin mo Hillary. Hillary akot head of state ra igal Pacific no mesra Hillary Clinton a Johnson Toribong. Amle onti ria dilum sigia adalom teragal mentam rigel seben mo modo durar adal belaw. Mengmelti yang kali al-sifrili kamlara abitari mengagina momtera. Mau ulma belau lumul mengladur al-sifrili. Opo moger tirgal roabili kuarten dia ka imol adra national government executive branch min ngaladur tir. Di Michael Shannon, ali ko mo bes. Michael Shannon at 25,000 plus expense. Engegi del adal Kami dengan linggil, dalgil adal, elgong labis termara kongres, ane 15,000. Ma total, total amount, kredipen mga Mike Chana niya elgong ura arangay. Umle 40,000 raman. Ma ulum dimlet talbo ilak, kama marwa presidenta maalum marwa Dr. Quartey, Dr. Patrick Teley, Poligar Basilius, marwa ngirar Saul, marwa Isaac, angkar nagapan rai mling beta kaya sengang kamalta kai kaya ngal sedel for ni plus ngobagidel mo morarbai ngobagidel mo murarban dirga ka negotiate ra kongres ngidil bulura ad negotiate ra kongres bagile medelo sengang al Mike Chana na diom gudod el diom maktak tra radel bela mergo elai gel gong urelir I guess selbo mo mesa Mike Channel ang naamud legal federal program. Ay galigir hospital, school, algo gidi ang seora kal mentram legal mergid. E diaglo nelo sa legal federal program, au ulmong mergid, sel pasra la ito asing mora FAS state. May gida ka na negotiate. Ay gaya ring in barga. Malaka na negotiate, hindi mergid.
Hindi mergid, masay.
Ay gigi agora lel tiambol bolo ne ad velor sen al suku mangaria ngarar ruru ngi trangilun martilen dia gi modenge luru agi ne modenge gel federal program de blend negotiate tirma Mike Channel masada federal program legang del balel ay gal federal program al hospital maskul akmal dios si federal program a time ra harum legal men merela Albebilang change moriango del program, lang ko ngarisel ka all mitak risel wase no child left behind. Se gigira abus, el gira la school. May ka ngaringit to dia sendinya ka bulgul dolib nga ko bal wase ko mual. Lang mo mual na to dia kal marang. Ngaram ko mo mual, upon dia ka alam rigel mo otil wase ko mle anda duwe. Ikaw tel madingi, ikaw tel di nombre kan magdudura Jeff Farrow. Edi lagi mo martra Jeff agi molari. Ngra ulma gimilara Jeff. Nga kamle goto tiro presidente sa nga ka usigira adal Jeff Farrow ankle. En mura nga lo asen dia akditul kan takteri. Ya minister state ni amle Sandra. Ya Sandra sa akmal di nombre kan magduduri. Makmun kan takteri ngi agi molari. Baul nga gina Jeff doban merela. Alia Jeff akan traktori obla mesa ngalo mungkin. Se 15,000 ini dia katal SK 15,000. Alsan mo taga, lola rin di 13,000. Iyal bebilen di 9,000 a lola rin amanda. Iyorra berde de laurelel. Agul ngitra ada bela ombol longo do akl marang. Letia kabel mentri gido rogu suadar adra bluadar bol bertakla tugol morti. Egi dia asogal explain le gorga.
Okay, namo bertakla tugora ikagidele compact. Kimitia boy namo bengel wasi. Agel betia tami masada tiakan marat tugol. Ikagidele wasada Koshiba. Ikagidele marat tugol. Lenga amak channel serbetia urbang idele dergel la del gota. التقليل يا غورين ستير تمغد دو انغا نكان مساده دي ويجلو القويا كوشيبا نكان مساده مغرا لو يا غرباي يسولان انجي دل ايكونومست الاوكيف نجي لان سيجي در امستات المغد دو انجي دي اوتي يا ويا لونغي سياسين راتغورا كيساي ngoisai kam so dingel اوكيف لو سنجي نغران مالجيت
malu il poite dia se comenga plabesra Kevin okay tirgang atte del staff el mar en wela abili cuarte ma tamir masao agebin ogi ma block chegera seragim segertir rogul gamo olta background rgmi agebin ogi pa amle consultant tra FSM ma martial inge financial consultant la agi o mesra contract en dia kaludud inge dimle engaran klel volunteer en digri pe expense ring Mengegim gilu le clear, Mike Chana na gugering. Gyoger yak, Kevin. Ngara osungnya bertial. Tial proposal legal federal grant ma. Masel ada kang ngara li. Mengeo el ada kang se elor tia kabel mentre belau. Membai gegidel Kevin seragim molulu ra Mike channel mengegi iba ada se como hombre al sela talbuil agi dilu ko merkong engegi de gimulungi trior gedi engegi dia au ulma ambrigel sel dulu asa agi miskimia telal million engegi del geben ogib makamama amongu teludo del me bregin ngi break divide del 15 years o sendiak engegi del geben ogib Malikom de imlejero et offerra 59 e diagal mo offerra 120 sam magi mundial mo 168 remember ser tingela al si fridigen delo se take it or leave it
I see
lo headline era Moses Ludong
I see
tiabelau e como madidilundiak e abai garba bel other tirga gider wa al sifririk agol ra president o sia gimes kimia 250 e ali senator gamde bottom line gider lo uram le 225 25 million above sale le bottom line gider
ngel del gadul bengala Max Shannon Russell Cubs
okay sa hotel de yankle nakada go yankle la
gigidre lang amlil gigin 15,000 dollars extra kita ngatel ul tak lebrang lo ya ka documentation ra kapelment oi ela imora direk sogal mom sader ngin ko rahmal mangrod lo se administration at Johnson amni rang kami to saudra imora klal mal mering la ran e diak do ngel lo sengirel ker asphalt plant Semblable leo. Hal ki witi del babier el al report lengel chairman ra CIP ablen order ngi a presidenta senate lo saka investigate tila sengara. Lemlar niya alang li adra blud mela say. I get lga del tiakla lo it sel club del sel surang al side. I geng magarat tele ngara magalo it lo se mal mring lara. Matigi del lang a babier el ang al mora attorney general ngi lara chairman ra wis amintigi del CIP ueki Paul ueki. Ngwasay Dear Attorney General Drangilo, please see the attached report concerning my investigation into the whereabouts of the asphalt plant system procured in 1999 by the national government and used for a road paving project in Peleliu. I humbly request that you further investigate the issue for matters of fair value exchange and possible collusion. Please look into how a total package of $1.8 million was surveyed in 5 years' time for measly value of $64,750 without actual money received by the national government. Thank you for your cooperation in this matter, and should you have any questions or concern, please do not hesitate to contact me. Di Albaviere, Ambassadoras, Abavier, Ngal, Senator, El Mora, AG, Wasikam, investigated yang, e magurgri lingwasit, aklalo mbrula aswar, tulilul morablilo, el government terbela milarar, sa 1999, $1.8 million sa total package ngi. Eso lang en lo matigil wasing tiangam lo trao apart serngi mendinah mo trao as a whole ditring ilay gel sorir en artiang lo sa surang alen sans company ading ilay gel soal emergo moy tagel urestringi metigida direct bavier akabe no rai viki kanail melo ase motobda ilang en mal al eyesore. Eso lang tira ding ilay gel sorir raigal klalo 64,000 aral ne $64,750. Eso lang edim lakaudo del tuobda. Ndim le exchange el momru rara largon rara ngersung ngara imora papel ngartiang. Mang tiang adim le exchange sa receipt. Oh, pesca gagi the clock ligar aswar plant again brilliara el equivalent to the amount of 64,750. Elang ay gigidre lang akot malamal ula procurement. Hindi akal sabiela administration ratami el ding Michael Soal Parche o traul mora a brother-in-law ngi emergoe diakal chis ber sangalel belaw man diakal recorder ngi luasi mloso is ber sangalel belaw. Ay gagida bay do mesing el mut mal dalala adel ngrenga ra gagid el over expenditure. Ay gagida ding la semlorgel udot puay. Ya over expenditure ado ding el wasi mlora suer Michael bebir aus pele la government. Seguida kuma di soal duri kire la.
Senator Gagotlu, right? Gira del mo dingel wa sengid claro agablement al sumo mo truling mo rapid mar adro go moria a opportunity til bidder ti claro. Es el 60,000 el gong mo oral. Untangam le decide ringi. Di surang lama atami let in-laws. Tila gira mo tutak la adringi.
I see.
Hindi tirgaw ba government to clearly wasen dia kasi bedan mo tutak lagi na brother AG ma. Ang gumda so sige na attitude til.
I see.
Em hitel dol going. Leng seral gotol lo top del til ay gidele. Asphalt machine. Nakaw ang ara record del dilu memelaga mo ng asphalt na blilo be mo smentring. Lenga gidele adam lara belawm le adra hawen rang klela jani woger man I never forget that man. Was ngaram dia ka mosment ya cement el matamal tergibrin sub uldi ruli. Ya omong asphalt el matamal in tomeli terro gide modal su ruli. Serak pusringil to boy. Esel tame senator to kulo singa uno mo do bertel masmenta oburat betura. Ading il tangari pas plantering. Dim la lo mesra klung yole la urior. Tabay yul mesra singa ola bal mora agom balirat betura. Maktim lon mo gunil to obok makara. Bisegidan yulun mabli lew. Bisigidara rabli lew الأرض رجوع مثلا يصير رتل مباي ويلا رجوع لو مثل تيل مع مسمنت أجين بدين مباي ويلا رجوع لو مثل أرض يوم من مسمنت رادين يلا يقال لو مثل رجوع ستيمولوس لورا بريسيدنت الديسمنت اتليس بيرل ليت النبل
ما يصير الآن ambassador كلاو باتيل newspaper أتابعه kami mo ay silwasa ilan mo mesre ilan patok expenditure ngara 20,000 lui el tela ma avart ma oktiu ma imor kluk e ako mesre ang klela brother atamil Kashmir mangsaw e ay gang reimbursement trakal maalu el ngara lui el tela
e alin dinga ulurior of finance mle employee ra government ulurior of finance era newspaper page 11 na tabelaw Magarang apart rasido sharingi mengirela government el haro. May gabol mo daging el telal madat madangin. Lengkam le all other get. Abolo mura ruadra con tem gerem.
Oo. Kami sa tiyala, PPE, $1,000. A direct reimbursement, $631. Ay gadi ako sa murang-arang. Tigida ilang direct imura, 1,340 direct mura Kashmir. Ya dome sa igagid el bebil, ang manal di refund rakal maalu. Mal di refund rakal maalu, di tal blungur engar edel dart madrangel. Oh, tiagid le drakon tay. Oh, tiagid $333.60 radra kantay. Oy. O siyang was ndiya $165. Oy, direct class foodstuff nga $333.60. A question ambassador say ay gang mal betokol telmalala tira metto dra public.
Hindi alam mo lam na Minister of Finance at time.
Oh.
Maigal adulong lil terung mal tarandir mo.
Oh.
Nang magara alaway ka.
Ngwasay.
I-reimbursement nga. Ngara ulong mo niya part sa sidosyam. Akal. Nagtrikat ng tangaligila government, nagiging lo makartir.
Dawo nga.
Magulitra ala ka, belaw mo bolo mesa sa newspaper na, tiya belaw na page 11.
Ngwasay.
Tigidal nga rin. Hindi ko page 10, o mo mes rin, engkal tamim lagarang mo do na 200,000 a year, el official expense rin nga na Taiwan almay. Tiyan nga la Taiwan, nga la Republic.
Ay lang tilo sa stimulus.
Girem logger. Hindi ka mo ngay kaseral senator. Es el cara a Flore Flor Google was egal udo da Taiwan al main ram dia ka record ni. Dia ka do ngel diesel.
I see.
Emergong en matamal la PSP. Eu eran matam al close, etu udo da a pension. El $1 million.
I see.
El bo lam net ceremony. En ul transfer ngi lot dungira pensionan. Dimlangal talboil, arbarira withdraw dudir rogoy.
I see.
Abila albul, mabila tami, mabila ngegidle. Get al lawyer ke level lawyer president selta.
Naknabes tranquil, no.
Anyway, tirger rogoy kmedra obisa president rogoy dimle withdraw dudir. Ay geludo do tingilar get.
I see.
Arbarira tingilay galudo dur get.
Oh.
Ay disel ludo. Eu comedia $1 million, emergo close ni. Ela total was a pensioner. Am tamalang.
I see.
Engara mandia ka mo gero tirgal lutbri tialudo. Engara mandia ka mo after it. Ega mo ngay sira gulgoy ay ka aura senate. Ega ul senator le melgo raglo sen. Nge president mo sol sola obra talk show ni. Eng mal nakpur karong loreng sergau di criticize ra aigal stimulus ra Taiwan ma PSP. Maktilul galu asing mal soga legong hindi ka puri ming lusi lara babir. El sugum dia kam si lara babir engi ada outro kelmo dinar ti altoy. Minglil sim sera August 4 2008. Ega madangel di lagan mo. Remember sel toksiori.
Yeah. Say da Larry Cadard,
Larry Cadard ngel lawyer. Ngabiil.
Why say?
Ngel bilaw lulur to seligara Caroline.
Why say?
Gimatam lo withdraw mat tokludo.
Why say? Ma ulang ilas anu gertir te dimla katoy rogo yang aklo 37 years. Abdu de galan erudar tetelar ngari temal dimla at least ulu ay sergam kilat telal dala. Mbay Johnson am lamo 2 kami rogo 165 al tirgel ulago kami mlamau dudiu Tom Roth, en president Toribiong am le ule at least nang mas sebed mas sera igalu dudet. Ada ngi tami se ngari dim le golo ngakat eli. Mehmula sei. Tanzi makachuto sitram la madre oi. O mas unclear. Mehmula se temlera blimam. Emrogo e gau titrangal lengal tanzi amle mereder tiagi le pension plan.
Wasi.
Emroya tamil gong murngil wase. Motobadia 1 million ngase over my dead party.
Wasi.
Mungwase. Matafar ngi engwa elbu ulun mong.
Wasi.
Mungmosapel to bada 1 million. Aigal dilur nga ako bang tel madengwar ngi. Dilur nga kasi temlera blimam. Ngwase madiak madakto mo ay sa dias lek mo ay sa gel lulogoy tirga ruba al dong okra ablimam el kauti tagang al girela udodra a pension plan. Aiga kita girin mo madangay. Dakbal kasi ba ng miro nga leng akul to bada igam suin mo madangay misel mo ren sa gigid el lulakat tokol meto bada buhay at least ba mo madangay klemrang. Adang. Okay, kabo
Okay, Senator. Ilagay member ngi sila lulusun merangak. August 4 to 8 ang wase. So ako mera a talk show nga 9 a.m. August 6. Bols edel small da gal ultal akl merangak. Algo nga ultal akl ngira gira PSP. Makmlong. Egam laringi mga madangi. Sira agigong en remember lestat attack nga udodra kira bang kyam anyway. Ya ka dilulu sa kamo ay sa gal 47 al utmula sa milar no labaw do derge. Krimen berra musodel.
Wasi.
Abay berra gal utmam le ulsyong lalgong manlewil omrelen mura ngaral gablil matamsa.
Lo dar silmo.
Wasi.
Oy.
Al ubo mo aurulak mo chega regor gal utm. Gel buy gel Emilio sia presidenta ramliga. Emle gel bus. Alam lo desperate ngel buy mo no etamim lo marra utmri. Ra al sela je.
Wasi.
Ya bebir regel lo lama igal blank travel check $1,000 denomination ni. Again ila tamir gel. Ali remember atamim ne claim lo sen dia kablir a Las Vegas. Hindi ka claim lo sen dia kablir a Las Vegas.
Ngau kai.
Al sugum dir ka claim lo sen dia ang mal ka rira blula.
Oy.
Le ang algelang ari. Ega kita 47 lu. Ega kita record ni. Ega nga namo telal la top dir al belal sugum dia ka ngau kai. Ega kita ngari. Idi ako din tera regal utma dilu asem le ulsyong. Di 47 al utme al sela 8 years. Ali ko mo bes. Nga mila official expense gon $200,000. Right. El dia kan nga la republic. Ngiyer stimulus la Taiwan al may. Ngara klisi ilulubang idi clear $200,000 mo. Dia ka hotel nga record. Dia ka expenditure record ni. 200,000. Kadim ke isang 8 years. Tara ka 200,000.
1.6 million.
1.6 million. Ay kagina ka lulab lo mara utum.
Adi.
Ay kam legire lududela ablur bela ng mo dudel ng presidente. Tao mula kartala.
Ese el malatigar niya seguide mete mo na seguide dia sa grassroots. Dia nga grassroots. Le gamagara grassroots lo mlaya mas ay gagide le Lexus e 3 blim 3 4. Oo. El go grassroots.
Hala de bora beginning. Ali Gobes, ser algo como presidente en ulumlara Lexus, ngiro Lexus. Em lomring el explain lo asetel Lexus umlalmei, mal sugum gom recall. En ultal klil wa se admala adebil sabo a ulpresente tial mora debi. Wasi?
Wasi.
Ali sabo alul de guerra adra federal en income tax amrigel. Tax Mle dinar niya. Seligra sabo mle dinar wa singa kadila katal gura Lexus. Seguir el Lexus blalo trur a Philip Clay. Oleh metiang mle present na mam le gorga kasbem lo trur. Elang omlanan mutul imong. Mga sila nga talk show riak tilu. Como omla Lexus Hindi ka Lexus mle bam. Sige ano mo kalang niya bin. Sila tumatang il tela. Tila mo dir.
That's a good question.
Halang dia kan kita dalam martai kan. Some are record. I got 47 al utm. Tela niya mle ulsyong. Ngogoang ringi ya 7 omular. ega ngara, ega recorda agorta, ega da recorda tang. Dimla diguli. A presidente na masau ser presidente. Esera lo mogador na blirra all, metial blirra madalai, en dimla klola permite equipe. Mengaria baber equipe bin bolo algam planer ira all, ya continue mogador seblai. Metial blirra madalai lungi ser gebur seri. Seguido el presidente, dimla katal lola permite. Ada presidente a bekla agire del tirakla. Ngire del mangolwolo. Legi dia enforce igalla. Entah mulu asa alla equipe bin di wil al sumug violating dia kabel gul dia kal crime. Ngari ole lurur ram amarin resource. Emo ko convicted emo ko lubus. Egal bus e dia urora. Agabelmente sel daytime, eu bam la agabelmente. Eu bam me rable bulis un galbus mergo en par gamla agabelmente la bulis. Un país suado lo que was a gel reimbursement mo na kasimir. Ageng le ogiwang la drong lil terulo dam. Malbul. Bakla ngari reimbursement ra kal mailom. Legel luderra abuil. Maldim le mal tel mora boket teringi dia rom araglel. Legal ara lagal malim misel beto.
Epe ako miseligar akaspire ng annual leave. Tape annual leave. Ay keng koral amkul dia kam nga annual leave.
Nga ngara contract ari annual leave ni.
That I don't know. Oh.
Anyway, another bela omes. Tuni tringmiro se bomo nguyura newspaper amo se ludong ra 10 ma 11 el page. Relal sils. Ay gagi da record the tin meden. Begini kau lagi sang al sugum gadem lam tiga record a 206 207 208. Ya era 206 el mong, a 205 204. Kalen bel toka bailangai.
Yes. Sel taraki malgi mo ngiringi seludo del mora aquam el darta telael. Solang ang letiang em sa ngi lua sei Lorangele Davis. Ya Davis agi mo ke ngi wa se dimlet blo check am ne sera 204. El dori 5000 a imo ma dori 1000. A dori 5000 seludo dum lor. Ai gida pura come curren salgong tuluspe el ngilom arabli la puntang. E accountability seludo da dibus. Dado ngilo se tiang taam le receiver ngim lo rang raluror. E loiten men elang. Atara direct mal melgo asya tora la mangara. Ahan koram la 7 oige. Dim la kalo turu ra kongres e melsia pelur bela ra dart mo gail tela el ngima hersikiota.
Washington DC.
Ata. Ya el top de la buata mula se mal over expenditure mal te mal mogul to ega gora tu taklia kun oi ya gorta mula se kamo olton se aki loiten marang mdilla la akamo de taiga ai mung tao mula garta eso lang es el gumestrengal el tamir mung sao en mal mo taklu ase mulum togra kampak Ulum togra kampak, tesera mga kampak, malkrokl murmurto mo president, mga rakal ng okra al selsay, el maongi, yodorsia kabalment, el mora president Toribyon, el blal senan payday weekend, magora loge gogil, el adam rigala se no more talk, oy. Le remember ngi al outrengele, ngagidele Mark Pesner, mesera al bora Washington, ang lol mo ileak la tablelo mga se Palau's desk. Engagid ya lu ay show tul oil del girela kabalment bela or mora State Department. Why say? Me ela ser al top dem la modia gaudo dem top e ago Clorenza sea a Johnson am la gorelia 250 million mol krokluk marmurt. Ngang diakal mal desperate la ngartel kabalment matar besul.
Ser el lugar tera el expense ira tarraga mal adir sangrengere.
Akum tasu.
Hindi dia ko gilo sa obong girelo gyo Allah. Lengge en area 100 some thousand official expense ringil top dra largit. Bela sel nga Taiwan al mil 200,000 mga 300,000 official expense ni.
Nakamari-member
Plus salary.
Nakamari-member ka sa talpo ng ok edosada udo de kriblo or wasengarger ay gale report raudo dra stimulus ra Taiwan. Ka madiblo mi takri.
Tila amount ringi.
Oo.
Ega nga naman dia kabid ringi di award ng mga wata.
Why say?
Remember na tara graduation ng mga PCC. Al sugum hindi ka mo maranaga mo gera Patrick Talim, president ng PCC. Mleget speaker, I happen to be one of the member of Mleget say. Imbil nga dadul wa siya, agores wa siya library ng PCC so milo mo do ngima. Akmo donate elon maldartel tela. Ram sel PCC, ar graduate, mar parents sa dirga ka imol sense mo merela.
Why say?
Magulgera Patrick wa, singaram dia ka morir ni. Ang amlong song sa giligera Taiwan le chanchin ben al bildambi. Man amlo da sa el manat gele president of Taiwan. Din 600,000 am le girel mo PCC. Mga madangay ka taram le part of fundraising mo PCC endowment. In fact, ngaria adal amle donate taw do mo. Maulgo blam mo urut sel. Sengora na namodor.
Tele library. Why say? Gel adra sa Taiwan akum taso.
Oy.
Solang ang arya kagid adra blue amlgol wasay ngaira mang 11 88 million maso kapel top de lo all infrastructures malubeng enral rirul elmo atter ngi metial 88 million mal dia ya domes ra chanson de gangar eder rahma telal buil eso la ambassador nga ka timlak salmes ay kalure ngalat akim nora malkayok club se aku mesel betul ang arma iu eso lang seng ngarmalu akum taso kles tulula ang malkayok nga ano citizen se en marda street light el mon morap tulula es el ment sel belngel el tukla side ringimo ya aku mesra sa en tarastimulus oy ya malkayok el embergo ya chan songor sel ngar tial lobis ya remember ringim le approve sel udo dulu lengit ringia lancet el momru rabara tiagi de lengur sa nkult mo ma al selam malgayo gadrur trelang ay gal hayya dia kalau losok nabat mo klarar al selam malgayo esel man no masar go ringi ragi bora ablur ngot mau nga kom da susay auriol mil gat mok tal aditial madalara al oben dia kisel tur tial ngot pong endi smentel meay ulungir marda reflectors ringin mon muradit ya ko gering o say tiagi del mandit tel gibel mede la sumak mangay tiagi dia ko tarakot el magat moklo
anyway senator nga definitely mo mulusa bira kal more agil demand na investigation or tel expenditure kasmit
oy
akmal mo demand ngi even eska president o tia must be done let tel sukum mendiak ang arbabal adrangal mentas bil way sera boy yung bulak ra boy
elang ngarngi apepir ra gagi del project termano masarung ngarngi kimlo rungarum lunguye nga karung ko detail biterap tula ang ra old age alo betiabla lungun mas ra al sen ngar bateng al mel seligele sera katolik mahmadit telgib go mede el mesois braimeo en la momrek ngarum lunguy mesegi del telgib mede ersel metalara mal es el mal so ngarngi gal presidente ambassador maskid a breakdown rastimulus
yang liga require back project trabway elang aram ko muno sing tomarta information ngaran information na doman
I see
betel gampang to sira gimgu gimdu manggil soal loral mega gida babel o bebula table mola ka pir gmiu agora saber adal gong mal borotol makung ngaram ko manib ais lo sem borotol yang aram ko sel governmental do marta togori
no sei ela go mestre lang en mal metod dra newspaper mal di goradio megido di malagora President Administration. Ela kumesen direct milagor sel togora igagi dile diplomatic nga David Morrison. Akalo ngel wasay sera 2010 solang ngarngi say the diplomatic note ang lambang ngarngi 006 MSMY 2010. Mended issue engiya tigrengi. Direct President Johnson Toribio ma-immediate family members ringa dia kal na shares ra anatilus ma Solaris ma Palau Airways. Gavin gel partner na Palau Airways algong Gavin Chin.
Ada ngolek.
Oo.
Ngolek ra.
Norman Chin.
Norman Chin.
Oo. Etiro talakra nga ma president makasabi nice.
Hal. Oneng ra. Etikat ko amle on tirman badit telegram na Taiwan na Malaysia. Emergo tunang do traurin ila seral natatelael. Elang basbes.
Elang otlakra ang gagi dele presidente lo sa Rainbow ownership ra Rainbow. Tiyan na motela ra kan reporter nga presidente parte ngi presidente sel gombalim nen meelang. Ngor nga damal direga mlara sosyo di mlaka dun mongorang.
Koy.
Oo.
SLA.
Etid lo kartela sa ngalgera TJ Imrur el ona share sa Eurasia.
Oy.
Emlo on ra time langar obistra ra vice president.
Oy se.
Oy. Ay kang artia madiak do mula kay gagit. Gagit mal ngartia.
Ega namtangay.
Oy. Elang direct mulgola se elatia sera lo artial sosyo. Oy. Ay gel contratre el al marogu le purchase administration ra tami ra 8 years ambassador $30 million.
Ogoday
million ra al sela 8 years el blel haral mora brother-in-law ngi ra ngagidele surang al junior.
Waise.
Ali ay kangara record mong somi ko mem ko mai. Hindi dia ka do marta elang ma somi ul diom gidol hal do osir mi akla.
Hal gandagal do lib. Ukra babir.
Waise. Aquí kita bebile ambassador en solang en mai ga mal toke kita agora mate me la senkyo mar ada la wase o tangar se mel goblulak dia mama dia ki
metel me mel goblulak ngale metel me clear record lengua se será algo tomne negociete como madim lo malar ira malengel
ngoise
alik mem mo gombulo moal erga medim lak adal mo do ngi adra gabalmenta mregel amle gotor gamiu Bagam siragi mo enggal baik channel na adim laga adlo o tiwa set ngialo do ringi. Arwa bilik quartes el gotomora Washington DC etemlon mo mesra stabra Congress. Emno mo do ringi del manzulo. Enggal ngal manzulo lulusul morino sa agalment tamrigila degal bolong do urtirga. Ay kaya mil tektia president Toribio nga ulmang lumdidur tun mo mesra Hillary Clinton. Bagay bay na giling no sabihin mo ngodur klia giling alsi frilik. Mungge omadong lim na negotiate lo banggede. Mergo serab algede temle assign ang gedin mo Afghanistan. Matingilung gedin bled mitri ra Hawaii. Ngel le sign lo magila president tergid. Kamadali din. Okay, elang gidil read Ali como ves, a presidente Toribio un lore del signer, sei, gigil aquel gele emesquida 250 million, o ase hombre del signer giga el presidente, e a congresa se el pasri il dimbre.
Wase.
Dice gidil no diagal se bel. Ma presidenta ulum le signer giga ultra good faith el moralmente amdigel. Mendiaga adal ngartel wa sa presidenta aulurib el mosaina ni dia. E kan blara Hawaii mga am kleda kam lari mga mle gorda am le happening sei. E gidam lo sign sel ba birra sulbra klabsera Hawaii.
Wase.
Le gidim le gau tok tok mo leit.
Mo leit.
Engel lo era realmente amrigel gola miltor.
Emrael.
Betul lo melulu rior to rina parking lot el mutro balmei. Remember? Bain dim lagam tordo la dad tira mil tordo.
I say.
Ngaga onitro asan ande melau memel bol atta ungil tokoy. Mela musiga ten melela ungil tokoy. Ngararu ngoleng al sugumang Tiyan 250 million na net zero mo 250. Tiyan dia kalungin mo na other belaw.
Uy, malungin.
Maadam le ula, aldabe le ul. Dia kalungin mo na other belaw. Lakad mo mda surgumi lang mabas lang lagi drak lugu.
Okay. Ambassador kada man la amatak la tokl toy mora other belaw patangel wase ya baby tira tira imora toy wase tun martra reporter tira el komle mugul el merar other belaw apolo tangay. Okay ngele Jacob Lu ang klelengel adel.
Oy, yan bilsaw daw da president.
Oy. Ngigidil gilnge segid $250 million. Jacob Lu. Ne rogul senkyo. Ak madangel waseng ani bepi regamium na me eklimi il wasem duratias malakal tega saide mo tegim senkyo ngi. Be all you can be. Le nga kasokal pay melgok ol malt maklamrang web trasenkyo rabay kumot areng eknas rasenkyo kumulakar kami. Bisa kita principal nga ka as a senator, ilwasay nga ka ulbanggela tamil 7.5 years. In the end, nga ka tera kusadar nga karakort tilmirelang. Miskak sel CD, elungun miskak sola nga kadir kam nostatra TV nga ka makmaeyo kertie metiay, mang direct dia hadil bebirar adan tokla adam ni affected by that maktilu tasak mano makite kimlu tloral sel bolungi la dengi. Hindi melmuter el altime sola nga kadir kam sadar nga karakort. Ya tamir masawa tirka katal ng suka kamara. Ang agitira kung kadra adra la al masawa nga karakort. Ngi abay sa el campaign mo ita hundreds of thousands of dollars. Di kalgora mengo suga kalngiam le ulak pemberur. Tiang ulur ni merenga mutiak loklek moroli al ub tiada la laptiklo. Mengakitial masawa nga kan men el al time ngin kay gidral dang oklelo or uranga. Kamu sumiwa adal mo president luwaisay. Ko ngak niya kasi may makpea expense at least. Hindi tiyak. Ay. Ongerura toy. Klo toy say tomorrow saudod. Aringila 250, maringila $50, samna mo ka kulsiber reng. Ito asenggang ramam sa 215 ke, mas ka 50, malo mas ka 25. Tirga di tilga utuloy dra dolong lirem lamo ko sibar rira muntal mlom do dertir. Yali say the one-time payment. Kami ko asir kami ulo umrang kaltami. Sera langar obis le Iraq. Telar kami am longil besrir. Telar kami am loringi ador marang alkiu. Telar kami am loringi abas rangal kababal tao pelmei. Telar kami am lewingil arolir. Kamamar adar kami da kotulungil ang mamra chanson toribyo. Lagi mral lungil agel hayar kamaman batutre la sel oral. En sebrulay melem el gohi ngulo yara da sport. Remur trador imal sen hour solay dia kalmuubul. Leklung yorera ralaul. Tok toa bla rula president Toribio ra kan namum rekl telarak. Madi de rak masesei. Solang ya future bela wangara a imata kitro kul senkyo. Mang celak tilir eliel muta soal dulitiang. Nga kel senator Alfonso Diaz. Ngaria borte wartela al adlo umrar nga karakot el mosois pra politics el merelang. Kulingit tergamiu. El wasayegi del clau umrar gamiu el merngak. Ngay lodar sa yegidlo si Clau Marang al Moragray Mariur ma President Johnson Toribio masabiir el mu tulkut makliaw ng tor o masyon mergid. Ay. Ako marar say. Yar sugumang akmistek yaku bang gamiul mo abu ledi kamlut tel senkyor ngak. Please, se Clau Marar gamiul merngak motorsin mortirgal teru rubak le mla oreo lo bantrir. I'm sure el waset tirkang ako tel malmalta tabsul omrelir el moraro kuil ad Michael Pekkel belura belam. So at mal diol ngit segid le gorgomiu ya klugo grave the clock en mangaya asmerela ikal polls ikal polling places mo mosenkyo solang do tir klial ul oreor el diaga saen ra suelbra clubsei aro kuil saen a medio ma directly gel sticker ngaram limiul girir ko social mo presidenta ma vice presidenta me mam nigang member bod sabela adrit tirgir rogur murtel molo a haber raigel sain kamiul nga niya sticker kamiu, either ko parkam limiu di hamom kaler ngiraral, ore kom kop kay sticker, elomu rasuel baraklub serel al sils. Okay? Imorat ko President, Ambassador del Tamiral Ngartiang, yakul ger ngil girela tial violation ra Code of Ethics. Nge omtas sulaset tiang kegrel toy. O President Trablu, ngar obis, temeli tiang asyabal to resign. To resign.
Why say?
Oh, hindi ka omtas sulaset it's okay.
Korang seringil lol terak betok al wasen dia kadil ngakal tagi kmal betok.
Oo. Pero tuloy sige.
Alital dim lakal la violator ya Arnold Masurang Junior tir rogui.
Mga kamam tigda ba bira election commission ethics commission namin lasin tilab lula kalan dia ka recorder kamam man adrabor da dia kalo ngay ma dia ka file kirel o lang. Ya sugo media sem laring ya violation ikaw yam lekot mo ngay lekot to ko ra to ko.
Why say?
Oo. Nga metiang wala ba biel mo se maka komeng dias maka mo dire. Ngak makara.
Hindi senator. Dia ka president Trablul al mangidil blue wase. Hotel timlia mal gegrel to koy. Ada ako do ethics sa ethics. Dia ka ako do ethics mo ngidil al di mo gidil ngar babal adra kabelment.
I say.
Bagida gidil ngigidil dia ka abod mo susubay kang. Nga milu tutak radat madringil telael dia. Gora lava blan radat madringil telael.
Tigida kerel mergao. Gerel merga ko kau mga wase. Ngara ma Koshiba wala ba information dia hal mere lo ais elol tutaklo. Malu ko tutaklo. Ay gal
information arol.
Ay gal gidel mula sen tamidilun ay galildisela ut mangaram. So akal mula sa igat tilov dra newspaper.
Mga kayo awlo ay sa igar sera ngoy sera lolusin mera. Augusto 08.
Ngoy se.
Raf asik sen ka pasingil laboy ngara mo mga blungan alder bela. Angelo gerat tila.
Diak gira man mo ngay gidi men sera question.
August 6 to 8.
Oo.
Era a press
conference.
Oo nga ka Flora Senate el mutul malgoy.
Ngoy se.
May gali di sela utum. A record de la corte, ya que record de su Koshiba.
No sé.
El adloror asil bedagal wasalia ay disela utmel lo ara tamir mo sa el presidente akmal betok. Makblo sigil makblo la corte malale ka public record.
No sé.
Agada kal berot.
Dia kan lolgor elang ay gagidil information tiagi diligara ar mga saw ang gagidil Kashmir. O may kale of $200,000. Ay nga newspaper at tiabelaw. Nga tiabelaw. Ay kada lola mo yuswa.
Ay gar mi mna obliga ang ultob.
Oy.
Agela utay. Girantan mo.
Ereng ngirel mo madangay. Hindi memo nga tiabelaw. Mabong nga gel breakdown ara siya gagil $200,000 lula tamir o ingram. Okay, ma-document number marogo ang alsel. May gagil expense rang gagil Kashmir, marata taya, mangarang clear, alu, makal, angara al-sel saygid. Ay gedi akal documentary kama, ay gedi ngara tiabelaw, will provide tirgel other bogol paid advertisement, adang. Okay, may gululu urgmiul wasa kama mading artiang alwasay. Orngase urgmiul mo madang eklemrang. Hindi timiul mo marang aklemrang.
Tiada kaldo ulel.
Hindi kaya aldo ulel. Ladi ko dal. Di ko dal. Ngungyang, so lang, tigil di mara lata mo nga kamal masang to ka gel advertisement tirgal tayo del other mortial el rurto. Mensoke ambassador el dingwa Michael Moon Moscow mo di bom du CC so lang mol musumet is media program gid ra tutaw.
So lang senator ngadi do maklat kirgmer other belaw. Radro go ogerang am dia bom rurto. Ngam la expired. La mo ko di madre ral Carol Bill ko no pasawra gel temiu aklaw mara gal moral al mal talada tirga gidel o social mas tira dias agul ni tirgmiu nga aklaw mara gmiu mora osisul el candidate tra dias ma emo bomungil lo mes la future nga leged al suguma ada hulwa se nga grassroot mla Lexus Claw Ablil Ngari ablil nga Las Vegas, o ko mga adrengila atamel, grassroot, memgulngi termino sa ngil alam titul define na to grassroot. A grassroot tal muran brao Hindi kalpora regular lang.
Hindi akal grassroots, grasus. Tira grasus.
Okay, kung man masular rogoy, gudla ka rogoy raklugo.
Okay. Dalway se solang mem da bodo oiga bodo kasmusum solang atelo sigra sel theme song rigit. Kung mo kasmusum edi gulngit tarugul adal wase ali ga mal di toira politics ndi hatko ngal modulong let leng kita di kau ade kau le kau tangay. Magdi madi Francis rigit el man mera puai solang all temer ko mo sub edel malmol malikang al no sub edel malmol mal kain kese ora ruah kamalti lima ngas makodal mang dolmol mal ngas segid el ton al du digo aser gamil wase ngoram lame ongit el wase bol sebegal mora tabulation ra Tuesday evening mang mo malas man morse merko en kulto bedengin life merkamiu di got se mo meu delegada tom ullo laba i morir di han misil ur mang mal mo takes time please bear with us akio top delegol loya ka superstation ng WWFM and live ngara mayong cultural center. Adaro sige sola ko man masaw le me ikang alin mo bes mo secure kluguk ra primary. Bye bye now.